Y'all call it a moment, I call it life.
Hi everyone, I'm back for our Journey to Canada series. This is our episode 2, and for this episode I will be talking about the secret steps that I took before going for the first official step for this international student pathway for Canada. Okay, so before I decided that I will take the student pathway, of course, I considered coming here to Canada as a worker, as a permanent resident directly. So if you want to come here to Canada as a permanent resident, one of the most common ways to do that is through express entry. But express entry is somehow difficult, especially for me who came from the academe. Usually express entry requires certain points. So my problem with express entry is that it needs a lot of proof of funds because it has to count like the whole family, the whole number of family, even though they're not coming to Canada with you. So I have 5 in our family, and that would require me to pool 27,000 Canadian dollars as proof of funds, which I don't have at that moment. And another problem for express entry is it requires certain CRS score. Okay, so when you say CRS score, there are a lot of factors that has to be considered. Number 1 is your education, your language proficiency, your work experience, your age, and other factors that has to be considered, and that each factor will have corresponding points. So the more points that you have, the more possible that you will be invited to apply for express entry. Well, the problem for my score is that I may have a bit enough of a score for express entry, but again, my problem is my proof of funds, which I cannot afford. So I consider the student pathway program. What's nice about student pathway is that even though it still requires proof of funds, you can have a sponsor. Okay, a sponsor could be a relative or anyone who can explain why they are willing to sponsor you. And the good thing also about student pathway is that it requires lesser proof of funds. I will talk about that on another video, the whole requirements for student pathway program. And student pathway is the fastest way to come to Canada, especially during the COVID period. Okay, so that's the first step that I took. Secret step. I had to decide which pathway for me. Should I go for PR, which I cannot afford, or should I go through student pathway, which is still expensive, but at least I can have a sponsor. Okay? Then the second step that I did is to have the right mindset. Why is having the right mindset very important? That's because coming to Canada in reality is not easy. The whole process itself, especially if you do it yourself, is very extensive, complicated, and there's a lot of things to prepare. Well, coming to Canada in the Philippines, I am a college teacher. I have a master's degree and all of that. But when you come to Canada, it does not count very much. Especially if you come here as an international student, you can only apply for part-time jobs. And part-time jobs, they are usually menial jobs like entry-level jobs, labor jobs. So all of your degree or whatever, how long were your work experience, professional work experience in the Philippines will not count much when you come here as an international student. So you have to be willing to start from scratch in a way that you have to start establishing yourself here in Canada. You start from zero until you will get to where you want to be in here. But it won't be easy, but it's possible. Okay, the right mindset also requires that you have to think that you will be away from your family, whether your immediate family or your extended family. When you come here in Canada, especially as an international student, if you don't have enough money or you just have enough money to come here, it will be difficult for you to come home anytime you want to. So it may take long for you to go back to the Philippines. For me, I think that I can only go back to the Philippines until I get my permanent residency. So fingers crossed that it will be sooner rather than later. Okay, so next is that you have to calculate your CRS score. I mentioned before, CRS score is the main requirement to apply for permanent residency through express entry here in Canada. So again, it will look at your education, your age, English proficiency, your connections in Canada, your work experience, and other things. So you have to find out what is your current CRS score, because that will help you decide how will you plan out your student pathway program. So I tried calculating my CRS score. I would be around 400 to 450. So with that score, I have decided that I will just take a 1-year program, because I think that would be enough for me to earn a higher score that will get me an invitation to apply for express entry. Okay, so like I said, one of the factors of finding your CRS score is your education. So your education, if you are not from Canada, it should be assessed. They call it the Education's Credentials Assessment. There are several institutions that are accredited by Canada. The most popular ones are IQAS and WES or WES. So before I really applied for student pathway, I had my credentials, my education credentials assessed through WES. I will talk about the whole process on another video soon, on how you will get your credentials assessed through World Education Services. Okay, so when I had my credentials assessed, fortunately, my master's degree in the Philippines is equivalent to a master's degree here in Canada, and that gave me big points in calculating my CRS score. So that helped me decide that I will get 1-year programs. That's because when you calculate for your CRS score, a 1-year or 2-year program here in Canada is just the same score. So now that I know my CRS score, my education is already assessed, I have to decide then what program should I get and which school or province. 1-year or 2-year program, which I have decided already that I will only take 1 year because that's what I can only afford, and to decide whether you bring your family or not. So when I talk about family, that means your spouse or your common law partner or your children. So those are some of the things that you have to decide before doing the first step. So on the next video, I will be talking about the main requirements for applying for the International Student Pathway based on the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada or the IRCC website. So we will be talking about each of those requirements and how will you go about and how you will get each of those. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to like our page, share, or subscribe. Thank you and see you on our next video. Bye.